I'm Anthony Yeo, so I'm the counselor at Student Care Services itself. So you can see on the left is my picture. So this picture was during last year during our youth alliance. We participate in the Beyond the Label fest, festival fest itself, and Temasek Poly actually showcased our some of our programs that we had, and for our student care department, I actually showcase our century therapy, uh, which none of the poly are doing. So I'm quite proud to say that we had this. Yeah. So for those of you who are keen and want to know more about century, you can ask me later. But this is just one of the therapeutic model that I offer to my student, and I have my own century therapy room in care at TP itself. And so perhaps some of you may be wondering how long have I been in this social service. So HSS is very close to my heart. All of you are social sciences student, me too. And I've been in the social service for the past 29 years. All along have been in and out of whether youth, children. I've also worked in education, special needs, NIEC, those kindergarten, nursing home as well. Yeah, GM students. So I'm also quite familiar with that. So I've covered almost all the sector in social services in Singapore itself. So yeah, so maybe this is my last leg here, working with students. I think it's really fantastic working with this group of students. Yeah, yeah, seeking autonomy, going to adulthood. I think this is a great age for me to work with all of you. Yeah. And so, yeah, what will we be talking about anxiety itself today? So I think you all know that anxiety is very wide, ranging from different sort of disorder, GAD, phobias. But I think in today's topic, I just want to look at more general anxiety issue, or probably what typically students are facing itself. But it's important to understand that every one of us, we do experience some form of anxiety from time to time. And it's okay, to feel anxious at all time. But what is important is how do we differentiate between a normal anxiety and an atypical anxiety, or what we call as an anxiety disorder or generalized anxiety disorder by itself. And so typical anxiety is just a normal sensation of worrying. For example, you feel nervous just before your exam or giving class presentation. I know many of you have to give class presentation, right? You probably feel nervous. And so when it's over, the presentation is over, exam over, you stop worrying and are no longer bothered by it. So this is just a typical anxiety. So it's okay. And the atypical anxiety is when someone always, as you can see, I highlighted here, always, so the word here is always, experience physical discomfort. I'm talking about rapid heartbeat, shortness of breath, experience insomnia, as well as avoiding tasks that cause the anxiety and tardy. Then it may be possible that one might be experiencing an anxiety disorder by itself. What do you think this would be? Do you think it's an atypical or typical anxiety? So Jane's exam is tomorrow. And so she noticed some tension in her body. She's worried about not doing well, even though she felt anxious. She was able to sleep after laying in bed for a while. After the exam, Jane noticed a sense of relief. She even wondered why she was so worried last night. Jane then met up with her friends for lunch and they talked about their favorite K-pop. What do you think? Shall we have some fun? I can't see the chat side. Dave, you help me to see. If you think that is atypical, you type A. If you think that is a typical anxiety, you just type T. For psych student, you should get this right, yeah? So Dave, you help me to see the chat. I can't see it at all.
Sure, sure. So majority has typed T for typical anxiety.
All right. Hey, that's fast a response. Wow. That's right. It's a typical anxiety. Okay, I no need to talk already. I think you are good to go. Take a look at Jessie, okay, and what she talked about this anxiety itself.
I was an extremely nervous and shy kid, the type that hid behind their mom to avoid any social interaction. My first day of grade 1 was a complete nightmare. My dad dropped me at school and I begged him to go to class with me. I couldn't stand the thought of being alone in a room full of strangers. I cried and cried until he said yes. Turns out I was the only kid in class with a parent sitting beside me holding my hand. And it seemed like the older I got, the worse my anxiety became. I began to get more and more anxious to do things. I never raised my hand in class in fear of being wrong and everyone laughing at me. One day the teacher called on me to answer the question, and I sat there shaking and sweating in my seat, trying to form the words I wanted to say. Finally, my answer came out as a stutter and a few people chuckled beside me. And yes, I ended up being right, but it took so much effort out of me. In grade 8, we started to do a lot of presentations in class. I would always memorize what I needed to say, but the moment I stood in front of the class, I would forget everything. I would stand up there completely paralyzed. There was this one time when my teacher called me up to the front of the class to present, and as I was walking up, I tripped over someone's foot, knocked over the projector, and landed right on my face. I stood up as fast as I could and ran to the girls' bathroom to cry. I felt like I was always embarrassing myself. Even school dances were a struggle. I would stand against a wall while everyone had a good time. Eventually, high school rolled around. My anxiety continued to hold me back. I struggled to meet new people, so I would sit in the library to eat my lunch. There were even a few times when the library was full and I had to eat in a washroom stall. I began developing a fear for being in crowded spaces. I could only sit in a packed classroom for a certain amount of time before I had to get up and leave. So I had to go see a guidance counselor to tell her what was wrong. And she gave me these slips of paper that I could give my teacher whenever I was feeling an anxiety attack coming on. And he would excuse me from the classroom without asking any questions. This helped me, but people started to wonder why I left the classroom so frequently. People thought I was extremely strange. The only way I can explain an anxiety attack to you is the feeling of not being able to breathe. Like something is pressing really hard on your chest and you can't take a full breath in. Your heartbeat gets faster and your whole body heats up until you sweat uncontrollably. It's a feeling of panic. Sometimes you don't even know why you feel this way. Sometimes it just happens when you least expect it. There was one day in grade 10 when my mom took my sister and I to see a movie. When we got there, the theater was pretty packed, so we had to sit in the very middle of an aisle surrounded by tons of people in every direction. About halfway through the movie, I began to feel the panic coming on. My heart began speeding up and I couldn't seem to calm myself down. I tried fanning myself with the empty popcorn bag, but that wasn't working. So I whispered into my mom's ear and told her what was going on. She seemed confused, but saw on my face how upset I was. So we all got up and left the theater. I finally decided this was enough. I needed help. My parents set me up with a therapist in my area. It was a very comfortable environment and I was able to tell her everything that was bothering me. She told me that I definitely had an anxiety disorder. She told me that she could work with me to lessen its effect on my life. This took a while, but with help I was noticing changes in my life. I began reaching out to people at school. I rarely left my class or a movie theater because I felt claustrophobic. Things were changing all around me for the better. And yes, anxiety is still a part of my life, but it isn't as dominant as it was before.
And so perhaps some of you watching this short clip itself will resonate with what Jesse experienced, the anxiety itself. And importantly, I think you need to know that it's highly treatable. Yeah. And so what if sometimes if your anxiety, if let's say if you're aware, you notice those signs and symptoms itself, and you don't get treated, it would escalate. Okay, often they're not individual with anxiety issue. If you're not treated, it would escalate into a more serious issue. So, for example, depression could be one of it. And what happens when one is feeling depressed? Let's take a watch, sit back, and listen to this clip from the Australian Black Dog Institute.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave the muck behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learned that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
And so, in summary, you have viewed the clip itself. Depression is essentially a very common medical condition. And what the speaker earlier said, it does not discriminate any one of us. And so it affects how we think, how we behave, our fears, and function. And what happens is that, if you don't get treated often than not, it will spiral into a more serious condition. Later, I'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, I think there's a term here. I think here is written clinically depressed. Yeah, when someone's clinically depressed. So when you don't treat simple depression, like that sadness itself, it escalates into a clinical depression. Then whether it go into a reactive depression, bipolar, maniac, and other form of depressive state itself, then I think it's going to get very, very challenging in one's life itself. So it's important to know that someone who is clinically depressed, the individual will often experience persistent sadness. It's a long sadness, a loss of interest in a lot of activities that he or she enjoys. But you have to remember, feeling sad is not the same as having depression. All right. So sadness is a normal human emotion. Yeah, and we all experienced it before, and sadness can also be triggered by challenging events, and we tend to feel sad about something. But depression is an atypical emotion state. Yeah, so when someone is depressed, he or she feels sad about everything. Okay, not just about just one thing, but everything. But it's important to note that depression does not necessarily require a difficult event or experience as trigger. So some of you psych students, you would have studied that sometimes it could be genetic, yeah, and hormonal changes, especially for female, and it just happens, and we don't know. Anyone can be hit. And if you follow some of the CNA news, uh, doctors, yeah, there are doctors who are being featured, they themselves who also have clinical depression, and they do not know why. Psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, people in the helping profession, nurses, yeah, we do get depression. And so some of the symptoms that you can notice often than not is the isolation part. People are withdrawing. They don't want to socialize. You find that you have very low energy, yeah. You find that you can't concentrate on your academic, on your work. You might be angry for some reason. You abuse alcohol or drugs, persistent sadness, no appetite or drastic change in appetite. Either you overeat or you don't eat. You have persistent sleep problems. Yeah, you can't sleep. Insomnia is one of the key factor. You have thought of death. You're feeling suicidal. And there's also the guilt feeling. Some of you will probably have studied sad cages. So some of these symptoms, psychologists, therapists, counselor, when we do assessment, we do look at some of this symptom, whether is it existing in your current life, has it been around for the past 2 weeks or so, before we determine whether are you clinically depressed itself. And of course, you can ask yourself then, what can you do to elevate yourself, to get yourself out from this situation before it spirals into a deeper depression? Of course, I think you can do your own self-care. Yeah, things like going travel. Right now we can't travel, but at least you can support our local travel industry. Yeah, move around Singapore, go and visit some of the iconic sites. Yeah, go to see a doctor. All right, you can take vitamins. Of course, antidepressant can only be prescribed doctor itself, but that's not enough. It would be better if it goes hand in hand with talk therapy, meaning to say counseling itself, which it works better. Yeah, observe your good sleeping habit, go into some yoga or some form of exercise, get yourself in some bath, massage, talk to your friend, keep with your routine, your schedule, listen to music. Some people find music really helpful. Be creative, go into arts, photography, or something that interests you, and also positive thoughts. And this is something that can help you to better manage, yeah, your stresses into escalate into a depressive symptom itself. So it's important to know that someone may be clinically depressed when persistent over a long period of low mood. Okay, in our clinical assessment, it's usually 2 weeks to take note. So if you do have friends who are in that low mood or what for more than 2 weeks, yeah, it's a signal to seek help. The other thing is a significant loss of interest and pleasure in almost all daily life activities. And of course, the last one is the aspect of affects all aspects of the life, work, leisure, and relationship. And so what happens if you're delayed in seeking help? It may lead to a loss of friendship, relationship, family conflicts, moods continue to worsen, academic problems, suicide attempts, self-harm behavior, and many more. And so every one of us, yeah, including me, we feel stressed or down sometimes. And it's okay. It's okay to not be okay on some days. So the important thing is know that help is always available and near. I have another clip. This is by Beyond the Label. And the two presenter is Nicholas and Nico.
You can be born perfectly rich, have a very good lifestyle, have parents who care very well for you. I don't think mental health issues discriminate against anyone of any race, gender, or social background.
Hi, nice to meet you. Please have a seat.
My name is Nicole. I'll be your moderator for this discussion.
I'm Nicholas. Today, I'm going to ask you a few questions about mental health in Singapore. What do you know about mental illness?
I just know there's depression.
How do you say that? Bipolar disorder.
The wire short circuit,
This guy's crazy, sell this kind of words.
has nothing to do with me.
Would you hire somebody with mental health condition?
I'll probably, make them work in a, admin side.
Sweeper, cleaner, or some simple job like that.
Either they hurt themselves or they're going to hurt someone else. Then if you have mental illness, you apply for a job. But who in the right sense will really want to take you?
Would you date somebody who has a mental health condition?
Some of them will get quite manipulative. They'd say like, if you break up with me, I'll cut myself or I'll kill myself.
And then sometimes they tend to post unreasonable things, such as like a small thing that happened, and then they will make a big fuss out of it.
I cannot handle. I don't know how to handle.
How would you react to, a friend or family member who's diagnosed with mental illness?
The bridging needs to be the family and not a stranger.
我们不是专业医生，我们可能处理不了。 If possible, I would just stay away as far as possible. 这个笑诶，最好是不要靠近他。
I didn't introduce myself fully. I suffer from clinical depression.
I was clinically diagnosed with depression. I'm living in recovery.
And I overcame it. I wrote a letter that I would like you to read out to me aloud.
"12 years is a long time to live with a mental health condition.
In the 12 years that I've been diagnosed with depression,
This is what I've learned.
I've learned that the greatest battles we fight are the ones with ourselves.
I've learned that most conversation about employment end the moment I review my diagnosis.
I've learned that shame is something society teaches you.
I've learned how to say sorry for showing symptoms of my condition.
I've learned that friends can disappear, and I will never hear from them again.
I've learned that family doesn't always know how to support you, no matter how much you need them.
I've learned that hope is a little voice that whispers maybe.
I've learned that recovery is a process.
I've learned that one small crack doesn't mean I'm broken.
I've learned that I have an illness, but this illness is not my identity.
So sorry that you have to go through this.
I'm so
Do you have any questions you want to ask me?
Okay, I want you to breathe. Perhaps some of you watching this clip itself, you probably feel heavy, and some of you perhaps resonate with it. But the important thing to take home is that it can be treated, and how you manage and how you cope, and you still can be a fully functioning individual. And so what happened when sometimes individuals who might be in depressions and they go into that clinical state of chronic depression, and they find that it's so difficult for them to get out of it. Often than not, they do have this suicidal ideation. Some even have attempted. Some are suicide survivors.
When I was younger, it was difficult for me to open up to people. I was often dismissed.
Most of the time, I kept a lot of what I was feeling inside.
I realized I was ashamed and guilty of the way that I was living.
I contemplated taking my life when I was 16.
Being a male in this society, we are told and taught to be strong.
But I decided to turn my life around.
Man or woman, I mean, we're all humans, so we feel the same things.
It's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to cry. It's okay to accept the fact that you're not perfect.
That message that came from a friend who had no idea what I was doing was what made me take the step back and realize that I had so much more to look forward to.
I can only thank you for being a pillar of support.
True healing starts when you man up, you take ownership of your truths.
So when you do open up to somebody, you tell them for the first time, it's going to hurt, it's going to suck a lot, but then 3-4 hours later, you feel so much better about yourself. Then you can do it again and again and again and realize that it just helps every single time.
I specifically got a clips from SOS on near individuals who are feeling suicidal. I want to take this opportunity, even for this mental health awareness banner itself, to talk about, being as a guy. Often they're not, you always hear about female like feeling suicidal, this and that. But not often they're not, the focus is not on the male, we guys. So it's important that as guy, sometimes it's okay to be sad. And being unhappy or sad isn't a sign of weakness. In fact, being able to recognize what's one's feeling and expressing is actually a sign of emotional strength. A strength that you have, that you're able to find the resources, you're able to seek help. And so gender shouldn't and doesn't stop one from being vulnerable or sensitive. So if we guys, and you also young men, if you find yourself that at times you don't feel quite there, it's all right. You're not alone. You're not weak. Yeah, you're not needy or whatever powerless. It's just that it happens to us. And so this mental health awareness is also in line with the beyond the label movement of ending the stigma itself, beyond the label. And so in a studies by SOS back in 2018 itself, so 94 youth chose to end their own life. Okay, this is the age from 10 to 29. And so for every 10 youth who died from external causes, about 6 were a result of suicide. In particular, mere teenager, which is at polytechnic or JC age group. Suicide peaked at its highest since 1991, with 19 deaths in 2018 and 170 increased from 7 deaths to 2017. Yeah. Do you want to make a guess? What is the average suicide death rate per year? Any guesses? Dave or Zachary, can you help me to look at the chat? See any contributor?
Yeah, sure. We'll have you look.
What do you think the suicide death numbers per year? Any guesses?
Personally, I would like to think it would be around 30.
Okay, 30. Okay.
Yeah. Someone in the chat gave 200 plus.
200
Around
plus. Okay.
100. Yeah, 100 is around 100 is a common answer.
About 100.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your contribution. Let me tell you, way back since in the beginning 2000 itself until today we are seeing on average about 400 deaths a year. So it's slightly more than one suicide death a year itself. I know because I used to be a SOS counselor and I work with a lot of suicidal individuals and also in the next of kin for those suicide survivors. One a day, and that is really a lot. And so you might ask yourself, so what are some of the warning signs? Sometimes you want to look out for your friends who may say something about, I'm going to kill myself. I wish I were dead. I wish I hadn't been born. Sometimes they might be, stop piling pills, they go and see doctor, they collect because they were thinking of overdosing itself. They may also be withdrawing from social contact, withdraw, don't want to go out with you, just want to be left alone. During this COVID-19 itself and the circuit breaker measure itself, we're seeing a lot of people actually attempted suicide in Singapore. And because of this COVID-19, their mental health has been worse. And for those of you who are in internet, not internet, this Instagram itself, so sometimes it's good to check out what people post, statement like that. And having mood swings, being emotionally high on one day and deeply discouraged the next, being preoccupied about death, dying, and violence. So this individual is always talking about this, death, and feeling very trapped or hopeless about their own situation. Often than not, people feeling that suicidal ideation is because they are being forced to a corner. They are forced to a corner because in their own world, they think that it can't be helped, it's hopeless. So a lot of time is this cognitive distortion that is inside their head. They can't see a way out. But in actual fact, there is always a way out. The way out can be an external factor that make it possible to be a way out, but often than not, that way out is actually inside our head. So the moment you are able to tweak your cognitive distortion and to reframe it, you find that, hey, you're able to manage that. And of course, the increased use of alcohol and the illegal drug itself, these are all the factors. And if you notice someone changing the normal routines, including the eating, sleeping habits, giving away belongings, writing thank you notes out of the blue, especially there's no logical explanation, saying goodbye to people as if they won't be seen again. This is some telltale sign. So research psychologists have found that usually you will be able to see some sign and symptoms. And the other thing is developing these personality changes, especially being very severely anxious, agitated, get angry over very, very simple thing. But the important thing to know that sometimes these warning signs aren't always so obvious. And they may vary from person to person. And some people make their intention clear, while others, they keep it quiet and secret. And some are really, really good at masking. So for example, those of you are aware that Robin Williams. He was a very well-known comedian in the 90s, the 80s. You know, in the end, he took his own life. So you would think that, hey, why a comedian would just want to take his own life? Chris Evans, the one who acted in American Captain America, so he was also feeling suicidal. In fact, he was diagnosed with clinical depression. You can go and Google about it. And personally, I have friends who passed away due to suicide death. I have colleagues who died through suicide death. And even as a counselor, I didn't pick up. You know why? Because they are so good at masking that the telltale sign that you can't see. So there are just one or two individuals who are so good at keeping at it, and the facade, their front is just so happy every day. You don't notice anything. Yeah. So unfortunately, this group of people, they slip out from a therapy sense, psychologist, or any helping profession. Yeah. So we don't notice.
I feel like we're a society that is so conditioned to hide our emotions so well that we don't easily empathize with people.
I think in Singapore, having any kind of like extreme emotion or wanting to do anything extreme is kind of a taboo.
I think it's in Asian context, it's a religious thing and a cultural thing. We're pretty conservative society.
I think it's seen as a failure in your life, a failure to achieve something, a failure of a loss of face, a failure of letting people around you down. So that's why in our society, failure is taboo.
You're not alone, and everyone's here to help you, and we can do this together as one collective society.
There's always someone next to you who will lend you a listening ear, as long as you're willing to share.
Maybe sometimes the person you love most may not be the one you feel, so you think you can't reach out to that person, but there is always someone to talk to who will understand.
Don't be afraid to talk to someone. I mean, it's a hard thing to understand, but I think if you find someone you can talk to, you can be open about, it'll make things a little easier.
To spark the conversation on how someone is doing.
It's a conversation starter.
I feel like it's a really safe way to start the conversation. And you can do your part by asking someone, how are you?
I'll be wearing it on the 10th of September, even though I think every day should be World Suicide Prevention Day.
By the way, you saw the clip. If you can recognize one artist, I think she's a DJ from, I think 97. I can't quite remember. Her name is Muna. Muna is actually our ex-TP student from business school. Yeah, and so she's also one of the SOS ambassador itself. So you ask yourself, what can you do? Do you think you have the ability to help your friends who might be in a similar situation? I think you can. This is the last clip, okay? The latest one from SOS.
Today is World Suicide Prevention Day. Let's talk.
It's scary, isn't it?
When someone says,
I don't want to live anymore.
We ask.
Why do you want to die?
but instead of listening to their answer, we say,
don't be stupid.
Why would you even think that? There's always something to live for.
Stop thinking silly thoughts.
There are others who are much worse off than you.
It's very selfish of you to leave everyone behind.
But then we're talking about ourselves and how we feel.
So many people stay silent.
And too often, we miss the signs. So, what should we say?
If your friend came to you and said, "My arm hurts,"
You would ask,
Where? How long has it been hurting? Did you fall down?
is there anything I can do?
"Do you want me to stay with you for a while?"
Most importantly, you will get them to seek help from a doctor.
We can't fix them.
We can't solve their problems.
But we can be there for them.
With love,
With kindness.
with care, without judgment, and guide them to the professionals we can help. So, shall we try? Let's ask, how are you?
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 Say, I'm here for you.
I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Say, I'm here for you. And then listen, listen,
Listen.
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 So, can you help? Yes, you can. You may not be able to solve everything, but by just being there, your presence is good enough. It's okay that you don't know what to say. As long as you say, I'm willing to listen to you, just talk to me. And after that, encourage the person to seek help. And most importantly, you want to respect them. You want to be kind. You want to be compassionate. Most importantly, don't judge. Because the fear of judgment itself often than not is a big obstacle for your friend to want to actually relate and talk to you about the issue. And so if we can embrace the diversity of people and our friends and just accept each other for who we are, I think the world will be a much better place to live. And I guess this is why all of you are in HSS, whether you are inside GEM or early childhood. You have a part to play, and that is important. But being kind and being helpful and do all this thing in doing what we are doing, I think it's also important to love ourselves, to have self-care. And so the title of also, I think this mental health awareness project is also talking about self-love, self-care. Yeah. And so it's important to look at, do you take time for yourself? Do you have a study life or even study part-time work and life balance? Do you socialize with your friends? Do you take time to exercise? Do you take time to relax your body? Whether you go for massage or something that is soothing? Are you having enough sleep? What about your nutrition? Are you eating well? Because if you don't eat properly, it will affect your mental functioning. And what most importantly towards the end then, self-care is also finding the meaning and purpose. What is your current life purpose? What do you want to do after you graduate? Do you have a purpose? And so all this, if you were to do all these things, these will help you to achieve total wellness, not just your physical, but mental aspect as well.